is that motivates, what it is that, is special or important to those kids as men, and then your job is to help develop that and cultivate all the strengths, help them with their weaknesses, and so I certainly, with Mike, that's what I did when I saw, I guess how he just sat back and, looked and learned and, how he reacted to people, I think says a lot about how mature he can be. Hey, how are you doing?
Good, how are you? Good. I'm sure you've been asked this, but just with DJ, I know he's reiterated he's going to play this game, but I'm wondering, do you feel confident that he can fulfill the same kind of role that he has in the second half of the season, as involved as he's been in this point?
Yeah, I do. I think that he's had a great week of rehab. He's able to start repping with us, and so I think that he's feeling a lot better. And I know he's a really determined young man. So I would be shocked if he wasn't able to come out there and make an impact in the game.
I wanted to ask too about Rich Newton, the guy who's kind of been in the background more in recent seasons, but he was once someone who had played a very big role here. I just wonder what kind of teammate he's been, where that's not easy for everyone to kind of accept a reduced role in some ways, and how you've seen him.
That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it because I think Rich is one of the best teammates on the team. And Rich's role obviously is not, as a starter. He's on special teams. He's a backup. He helps out in short yardage situations. But I'll give you an idea of the kind of guy he is. We were down scout team defensive backs one week. I don't even remember when it was. And Rich just runs over there and jumps over and starts playing safety. And after practice, Mike actually was a little bit upset. He was like, "Hey, coach, we owe Rich more respect than that. He shouldn't be doing it." I was like, "No, I told him not to. He didn't want him to do it." And that's just how he is. Rich celebrates everything. I think Rich has known what it's like to be in that spotlight and how special it is. And all he wants to do is celebrate his teammates and his team. So he's a special kid. Yeah, coach.
Actually, I'm sorry. One second.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Coach. I want to ask, Michigan's defensive line rotates a lot of guys in and out using rally groups, and you have to really just study a lot more guys than just the front five. Have you seen that from a different team this season, and how do you prepare for a team that just rotates so many guys in and out of each game?
Yeah, really. There isn't many defensive lines we played that don't do that, to be honest with you. I didn't feel like their rotational scheme was any more significant than most of the teams we played. Some people probably hang a little bit harder on their ones. They'll certainly rotate their 4D tackles quite a bit. But no, they got great depth. They do a great job of utilizing that for sure and rotating those guys in and out. But no, I didn't feel like it was a issue as far as breaking it down. You got it.
Clayton was talking about when you guys get your first look at the offensive line in winter conditioning, like, whoa, these guys are pretty athletic and pretty good. Can you kind of recall your first impressions and kind of what's made them such a cohesive group?
Yeah, I thought, two parts to that. Number one, I totally agree with Caitlin's sentiment on that. But, one of the things that both when we watch workouts and when I watch film, I felt the best probably about the offensive line unit. That they had a ton of potential, and I could go over my notes over and over of what I thought when I got there. I think it also, part two, speaks to exactly why we kept Scott Huff. And when I came in there, I was like, what happened in 2021? These guys are great. They're all back. Like, what in the world, with the exception of their center, Luke Wattenberg. I was just really surprised that there wasn't more production. So I went back and watched a ton of film on Coach Huff's work years prior to that, and just what a great job he did, and how good his unit performed. And so then, just took the time to sit down and get to know Scott a little bit. And, we knew some of the same people. He actually played college football with our running back coach, Lee Marks. And so there was a lot of commonality with Scott. And I just felt like, once we sat back and started really recognizing the level of talent that Coach Huff had recruited. Because if you look at the last 2 years, all of our starters, all of our players on the offensive line were guys that Coach Huff recruited. There are no transfers. So those guys are all homegrown. And I think that speaks a lot to the type of room that Huffy is, put together.
Ryan.
Yep.
kind of building off that, a lot's been made obviously of what Michigan's defensive front did last week. Is it fair to say this is a different test than you've seen all season up front?
I think collectively, Texas's front and what they did was really good. I think potentially scheme-wise, there's some more challenges that Michigan will present than maybe Texas, as far as just volume of scheme. There's a little bit more there, but they're a really good unit. They play really hard. I thought, as far as physicality, them and Texas are very close. I thought maybe the interior of Texas and Michigan is very comparable. Really good players.
Yep. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah.
What stands out most about Michael Penix's leadership, both on and off the field? What stands out most about him as a coach?
Yeah, I think, as a person, number one, I would say, and it kind of parlays into his leadership, is Mike's humility. I think there'd be a lot of guys that would be in Mike's situation that, you would struggle to relate to them in a meeting room, or, they're on such a big stage that it's hard for them to relate to teammates, but that's exactly the opposite. Mike's the guy who can still joke around with the scout team guy, or, just is a very personable, relatable guy. I think that's what makes him a great teammate. When Mike last year, when his fall camp, and he won the starting quarterback job, because he didn't get named starting quarterback till about a week and a half, 2 weeks before the first game, and we took a vote, the captain's vote. Mike got like 105 out of 110 votes, and I think that just speaks to, when Mike got there in the winter, he didn't try to stand out front. He tried to lead. He tried to, this is who I'm going to be that same guy consistently, and I think that is what he's done, and that's allowed him to really create genuine relationships with his teammates.
With your offense, with all the wrinkles, do you still consider it air raid variation?
No.
And if you could take the label off, how would you describe it?
I want to officially make sure I take that label off. We are not an air raid offense. We lead the country in passing, but we are not an air raid offense. So I hear that, and I don't know necessarily where that comes from, because if you're watching our scheme, I think you're seeing different complexities, and the number of wrinkles and pass progressions that our quarterbacks have to go through are very different than what an air raid quarterback will have to do. I'm passionate about that one. I'm sorry.
back to Pat.
This may oversimplify this, but is it tempting to just call shot plays all the time because of the personnel unit?
I think you learn those things over time as a play caller. Yes, of course it is. But there's no 14-point plays. And I think you got to remember that sometimes those plays happen because of your patience and your diligence game plan. So always seems probably on those really good games super easy to people watching the game, but there's a lot of thought and process and planning into when those plays happen, what you have to see defensively from the schematic piece that starts to present to people, and you're seeing, okay, this has happened, now I can do this. And so sometimes it takes longer in games than other times.
I wanted to follow up and just ask you simply, how do you see it, and how does it continue to evolve?
The offense, when you say see it, are you saying what's the style, or?
Yes.
Okay. I would say, if you're going to label it, I'd probably say a pro style spread. And when you think of terms of quarterback play, that's where I always start, is that our guys have to be in a position to truly be comfortable in pro style progressions. So complex reads, 1 through 5 on the progression, all the way through, things like that. Not just flood shots on deep balls and things like that, or not just quick game tempo plays. So, but I also think that our ability to move in and out of tempo and the shifts and motions are one of the things that make us unique, and one of the things that we pride ourselves on. I think that even in the last 6 to 7 years, is for defensive play callers, they're picture callers, right? They're seeing pictures, so the best we can do to change those pictures for them and the kids makes things a little bit tougher on them. And sometimes you got to remember you're playing the kids, not the coordinator. And so if that picture changes for them, it'll make it a lot harder for them to make the call that they've been given. You bet.
Ryan, how confident is what you guys do in that straight line downfield passing? It's like a philosophy. I'm just asking.
Yeah. think everybody has some form of, trying to stretch the field vertically. I think one of the complexities and what I think that we do a good job of, as far as like when I talk quarterback play and thinking about how guys work, is that you want to be in a situation where you have to absolutely tell the guys like, you got to find ways to stay on the field and at the same time stay wildly aggressive. And I think that the elite part of an offense, when you're really humming, is you're living somewhere right in that gray area. That you have the ability to make the right decisions, the right reads, the right calls to stay on the field and keep yourself viable, while at the same time getting the ball down the field. Because there's obviously an inefficiency that goes with those shot plays and things like that, just as far as the number that you're going to complete. So I think that when we're playing our best, you look at the Texas game and you're holding the football for almost 36 minutes, and your quarterback's throwing for 430 yards, and you start thinking about that. Your leading rusher was only 21 carries for 49 yards, but somehow you had the ball for 36 minutes. So there's a piece to that I think is really hard to replicate. There's a discipline that goes with that.
What did you do? None of us have any idea who you had in Sioux Falls, but who was your quarterbacks and did you do it there?
Well, back when Kayla and I were together in 7 and 8, or excuse me, 8 and 9, when we won back-to-back national championships, our quarterback was Lorenzo Brown. So Lorenzo Brown was a true dual threat guy. I think he threw for 40 touchdowns and ran for another 20. I mean, he was bananas. He's a really, really good player. If he was 5'11", he might have been somewhere else, but he wasn't even that. So, but I think that's one of the things, people have asked me, what are some of the benefits to being at a smaller school and things like that. Being at a place like Sioux Falls helps you build with what you have and make the best out of what you have, and the creativity can come out of that. And so there was still a lot of vertical passing in for sure. But we still had some quarterback runs that I don't really do with Michael because I'm not trying to get him hit. But that part, I think that there's certainly some of the aspects that you see from our offense now were relevant back then as well.
Real quick, Troy talked about this countdown clock or whatever it is. Each day is 161 days. Was that you, or how did that come about?
Yeah, that was the first day of fall camp. I put a slide up, and the slide was our vision as an offense or a team. But our vision was a national championship. And so the stressing points there that I had made to the offensive unit was far too often I think you get scared as a coach or just even as a person to think about what's possible. People talk more in terms of what's probable. And so I think it was very probable for us to compete or maybe even win a Pac-12 championship. But what was possible, the vision, was national championship. So every meeting it was the same slide, it was a national championship trophy. And the first day of camp when I put that slide up, I showed it to him the other day, it said 161 days to Houston. Can you have yourself built for that? And so now we're at a couple of days, and here we are in Houston. So
Every day.
every weekend on Sunday when I meet with the offense, I'd show them the slide, and 7 days would tick off of it, and again here we are. But that's a credit to the guys who buy into that, and I think a big part of that was on that slide off to the left. I had some information about the 1990 Huskies team. So I think they had 1 or 2 losses. They had a really good team. They ended up top 10 in the country. Very similar to what we did in 2022. Top 10, 2 losses, really good team. A lot of the components were coming back from the 91 championship team for the Huskies. Very similar to what we were doing. So I'm giving you a long story here, but I got this pin from this one donor, and it said, "Hungrier than ever." And this pin was from the 91 championship team in between 90 and 91. So the thought was, we got to stay hungrier than ever. So, I had the picture of this pin, and that pin sitting right in front of my computer back in Washington and Seattle. It's been all year. And so just getting the guys fixated on truly what's possible instead of falling and, kind of being conservative. And I met with Coach Peterson, who I consider a mentor, is just an absolute stud. And it was like the day before fall camp, and I was telling him, like, man, I'm really leaning towards telling the guys, like, let's go for a national championship. That's what's possible. And he even said, he was like, I don't know, you know, you do that and then you got to retract if you lose. And I was like, screw it, we're going for it. You know, so it's like 4th and 1 in the Apple Cup. You got to go get it, right?
You're right here.
With Michael, you had a large body of work for Indiana to evaluate. To what extent has he surprised you what he's done in these last 2 years?
I don't think there's been any surprise as far as like what Michael is capable of. I think that we all believe that he was certainly able to do those things, and also believe that, you know, physically he had the tools to accomplish all those things. So I think that if there's anything that, you know, surprised me, it surprised me that this hadn't happened earlier in his career, and it was really simply just because of injuries, you know, and maybe just not being totally utilized like he is at Washington.